All right, so my name is Gordon Wilson. I'm the CIO for Sumitomo Mitsui Bank for the Americas. And I have Anshul Vadavan, sorry. Gave him my best shot with the V's. We're here today to talk about how our bank is working to really power our data journey and using AI, GenAI. Those of you that may have been in a session earlier, we touched on some of it. There was a panel discussion with someone from our team, Tom Sawyer, and we did touch on this. This is going to go a little bit more deep, and I think Anshul will go into some very specific tools and methods we're leveraging with Deloitte to help us get on this journey. If I go to this first slide, you're going to see something about SMBC. Oh wait, go back one? There we go, double jumped. Sumitomo Mitsui Banking Corp at a global level is one of the top 15 banks in the world, almost $2 trillion in assets. It's truly a global organization. Where we sit in the Americas as part of the global banking unit. The global banking unit includes EMEA, the Americas division, APAC, ex-Japan, and then obviously domestic Japan has a massive mega bank that covers all retail, corporate investment banking, commercial banking. In the Americas, just something to note, we have a few interesting points that we've recently launched a retail digital bank called Genius Bank. It's part of one of our group company entities, Manufacturers Bank. We have a global markets, capital markets, Nico Securities, that's sales and trading. And then we really have that core corporate and investment banking. That's kind of the heart of the business now. Now the aspiration for us is actually to grow even further. And at the GBU level, the global banking unit level, that means really making our stack more modern. And what we heard before, I don't know if anyone heard Jamie Dimon speak earlier, but it was pretty energizing. He's always a straight shooter. He actually said data is the problem and the solution, essentially. He said without data, you can't do anything. And whether that means regulatory compliance and really the growth. If you want your front office, whatever that product set is, to be successful, you have to get there. So SMBC's goal, our goal, is to build this so we can be more efficient, more effective, not only internally, but for our clients, for our customers. And with that, you see the leverage to grow. Those who saw the last thing, it's like they call it a pilot-induced oscillation, where you start over-controlling the airplane, and that's not good. That's why you need automation, like a good autopilot. So if we look at the vision for a data-powered future, we're looking, again, to try and make this as seamless as possible so that end use becomes very trusted, but enabled by platforms that can make us more efficient. As the objectives, we could get into specific business objectives, but really the bottom line is that data has to be consistent, has to be trusted, has to get there on time, and with the ability to move that across regions. And we have some EMEA partners here. I'm not sure if we have someone from our head office. Our real goal is to make this at a global scale, which is not an easy task. Somewhat of an advantage, we've been brought up regionally. So as we develop a strategy like this, we can really go, leapfrog to a point where we're on that journey now. If you look on the right side, you'll see we're trying to optimize everything, go cloud-based, leverage all the tools. We'll get into some specifics that Anshul will go through in a little bit. Okay, let's see if I learn. If you think about, there's push and pull factors, and I'll highlight a couple of these, but these probably are not surprising to those that are in financial services and banking. Bottom line is we have to be compliant, and that means a lot of things. That means regulatory compliance. That means compliance from the standpoint of a second line of defense doing proper KYC. We need to be able to share information globally. It has to be consistent, and we have to do that with the appropriate controls. Again, that's leveraging this platform is the way that we're going to do that and the way we are doing it. We're on that journey. If you look at a couple of other items, they're kind of almost like table stakes, like advancing data governance. Okay, yeah, of course we want to do that. I think the upper left, though, if you think about the aspiration of the bank, if we get the rest of it right, if we're governed, we have clean data, we have a nice pipeline, the real goal is to be better at serving our customers, which in the end will result in the revenue growth. On the right side, the push factors, hopefully, if someone's figured this one out, please let me know and we can talk after, because everyone has legacy applications, legacy infrastructure. How we have to bring that together, that is a push factor. It's inefficient, it costs a lot. We burn a ton of calories trying to maintain that and then bring that data together. we know that's going to be a multiple year journey. You can't always get out of whatever that platform might be. We all have them in our own tech stack. But the goal is to make that as efficient as possible again. And when you have a chance to upgrade, then you can do so. I think the other one is, if you look at, is the redundancies and fragmentation. We had and have a lot of data silos still. We have multiple data warehouses that exist today running the bank. And the problem is when you have that, you get inconsistent, as you all know, preaching to the choir a bit, inconsistent in that end result. So you may have a different version going to a regulatory report, different version going to your front office for a client engagement, and then trying to bring it together. No one's speaking the same language necessarily, and worst case, you're doing something that could put you out of compliance. So we're going to continue to have these pull and push factors driving us really to our decision. Ultimately though, that upper left is really the goal of the bank. How do you grow? And with that, you get everything else that you need. So a little bit here about how we're using GenAI, and I think Anshul will go into some detail. But there's like two-pronged approach to this. Our data pipeline that we're filling up our lakehouse, our Databricks lakehouse, is actually leveraging generative AI to build that pipe and to implement that pipeline. On the flip side though, and we're early days at this part, is leveraging GenAI for the end use, for the analytics. So once you have that built, you can then leverage it really for those business insights and really get our consumers what they need without having to go do that themselves. Many places, I know we all have it. People are still chopping away at Excel. They're bringing together, stitching it together. Best case, they get it right, but it takes a lot of work. Worst case is they do their best, but it's not correct information. And so the goal of this, leveraging that pipeline to build the lakehouse and then leveraging GenAI at the tail end, is that you are consistent, it is trusted, and it's common. So whether your use case is for regulatory reporting, or if it's for onboarding a new customer, that same information should be there in the right form that you need. So this kind of shows you where we are right now in our journey. I think a key point, this is truly a global bank. We were brought up a bit regionally in the global banking unit. So again, that opportunity to cover a very complex set of products. We have, as you can see, all the CIB type products are in there, retail, all the global markets, sales, trading, derivatives, really complex landscape. And in many ways, just like a lot of companies, was brought up in different entities. And now they're coming together as a holding company in the Americas. We have the same thing happening in other regions. So that complexity is really what should concern us, but it's also the opportunity. The left side, you see, that's not a full list of our systems of record, but these are the critical systems of record that can really help start driving the specific use cases that we're going for. And on the left, you see there's various formats. We have everything in the kitchen sink, just like I think every bank out there. So the goal is to really get rid of that friction, make this as straight through as possible to that end consumer, whatever it might be. And again, going back to the analytics, when we really get good, then we can really start leveraging that for insights instead of working so hard at the basics to get that information into people's hands. So this is what we're actually working on now. So if you think the end use, there's so many out there, but for us, we're doing a risk-based approach essentially. BCBS 239, anyone, it's been around a long time. I think everyone is challenged, every bank is still challenged to fully comply with that across the board. And we take a lot of work, it takes a lot of work to do so. So we're using our risk team as a key partner, and that again is a global program, which is, I think, the way we have to look at this. It's across region and with our head office. I think, not surprisingly, FinRisk becomes the next level of detail, reg reporting, areas like that. And that same sources, those same sources though, once we get them into the pipe, once we get them into the lakehouse, can start being used for other things. And this is real now, we have the platform in place. I think the MVP, we'll go into a little bit more detail as of last January, bringing information in, and we're now consuming it for things like counterparty credit risk. And it's becoming trusted by our users. The interesting thing is, how do you gain that trust for people that are used to throwing armies against it, that have to reconcile, that have to chop through it to make them comfortable. So our goal long term, I think they're still, early days, they're still going to do some parallel, but once you get them comfortable, they'll be able to really essentially use that information and do the analytics, make the decisions based on it, rather than spend a lot of their time just putting it together. And you can see on the treasury side, that's really around like our liquidity management. And so these use cases are really core to just what the bank does. So the right side, we're not there yet. So kind of the art of possible, I guess is the way we would describe it. And again, the more we can get into that lakehouse from the sources, the more we can start going after those art of the possible. And that's really what, if you talk to the CXOs in our bank, they want that. They think it's easy, right? And as those in tech like us, we know that's like not the case, and we usually get a nice blame for things when they don't work. Well, in this case, we want to go at it so that we can make it very easy for them to get that quantitative data or unstructured data that they need to make decisions. Today, again, it's an efficiency play that was on the prior page. It's people, but taking those people and let them use the mind share for things that are actually going to really impact not only our compliance, but that upper left on the other page, actually grow the bank. So I'm going to turn it over to my partner here in this effort, Anshul, who's going to go a little bit more depth on some of the stack, and then we'll have some time, I think, for some questions at the end of this, right?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, well, over to you. Handle that better than I did.
I'm going to try. All right, so as Gordo mentioned, I'll quickly introduce myself. My name is Anshul Vidhavan. I'm with Deloitte. Thank you for your partnership. We've been working closely with SMBC for the last couple of years on all things AI and data. But specifically with the Lakehouse, we've really begun that in earnest at the early portion of this year. So what Gordo has covered so far is what is SMBC as a whole, what's your vision, what are your ambitions as they relate to AI and data, what are your priority use cases. I'm going to jump into a little bit more of the how and the details of it. We'll cover things such as the architecture we have. We'll cover things such as the approach, so on and so forth as well. And it's going to be fun. And of course, we'll leave some time for Q&A at the end. So let's start off with the architecture. So those of you who are familiar with Databricks in general, this should look fairly familiar. It's a pretty standard Lakehouse medallion architecture. If I draw your attention to sort of the middle of that page, you have a bronze layer, which is pretty much the raw data, which has been technically standardized. You have a silver layer, where at SMBC, we are following a domain-based construct, domains being commercial loans, retail loans, capital market products, et cetera, which tend to be quite different in nature, but also treasury, finance, so on and so forth. And then the gold layer, which tends to be much more focused on the actual consumption and the use cases itself. In terms of the architecture, as I mentioned, it's standard, but let me talk about a few priorities that are very important for SMBC as a whole that we try to service through this particular architecture. One of the things is speed. And as we mentioned, we want to get rid of the silos and go with somewhat of a unified data architecture in the middle. But traditionally, the problem that you run into doing this is you run into a bottleneck issue, where the speed of delivery tends to slow down quite a bit. So we're trying to address that very, very proactively. So even though we have a unified architecture in the middle, we are federating out the ownership and the responsibility and the ability to bring in the data into the bronze layer. And we're also federating out that responsibility from a gold layer perspective for people to be able to make their own joins, make their own data products, if you may, and consume it themselves. And that's a journey that we are on, and that's important. But you cannot have federation without some rules in place. Otherwise, this lakehouse will become a swamp. So the other thing that we're really doing is setting certain standards in place, giving the user certain tools, whether it's standardized ingestion tools, et cetera, having certain policies in place, et cetera, in terms of how do you bring in the data, how do you combine the data, so on and so forth. So speed is very important to us. I mean, we'll get into details, but the goal is the 25 SORs that Gordo talked about earlier. We are going to land all of that data within a year. So that's something that's key. The second thing that I want to point to is the delta sharing at the bottom right, I guess. And Gordo talked about the structure of SMBC, which is global, and also the different banks that reside within it, Manubank, Nico, so on and so forth. And each of these things are quite different, right? A retail bank operation is very different from commercial banking, which is very different from capital markets. So traditionally, each one of these have had their own data warehouses, if you may. And for any place where you need to combine data, you're ping-ponging files back and forth between these different banks. With delta sharing, that problem is taken care of, where you can have, again, a unified architecture, and the data that needs to be shared between these different entities and banks, they can be shared. So that's something that's very important. And the other thing that Gordo touched upon is governance. So you'll see Unity Catalog at the bottom, Collibra is the system of record for all metadata at the bank. While we are building this platform, we're building it as governed by design. So typically when you talk about data governance, it's an afterthought. You build all your data pipelines and you build governance separately. We are absolutely not following that approach here. And as we build this lakehouse, all the data that's coming in is going to be governed by design itself. Okay, so just building on that, I'll go through this relatively quickly. Some of the features that we're utilizing from Databricks currently, and then on the next slide, I'll cover features that are on the roadmap. So Unity Catalog, extremely important, building on my point previously, which was we're building everything that's governed by design. Now you cannot build in Databricks without the Unity Catalog, which is great. And the lineage is automatically available, access control is automatically available out of the box, and that is actually being utilized. The other thing to keep in mind is Databricks is not the only platform as it exists today within the bank data platform. There are legacy on-prem ones that are going to continue to exist, and there are competing technologies in various places as well. So the actual system of record for the metadata is Collibra. And one of the things that we are doing is also using API mechanisms to build connectivity between the Unity Catalog and Collibra as well. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Delta sharing, I touched upon, extremely important, very relevant use case for this particular bank. The other important thing here is it's global in nature. So while we have enabled a lot of Delta sharing within the US and the Americas itself, what's coming next is also sharing across geographies, which comes with some implications around localization of data, so on and so forth, which we are working through, but the ambition is that it will also be enabled globally as well. Workflows is tightly embedded with everything that comes with Databricks. We have a variety of jobs that need to be set up. We have CI/CD pipelines to promote code, so on and so forth. We have jobs that tend to be end of day, end of week, end of month, but we also have a lot of micro batches which run several times during the day, for example. So workflows is very well embedded and integrated with everything Databricks has, so a key portion of what we're doing. What's on the roadmap? Marketplace. Like every other bank, I guess, worth its salt, marketplace is something that's important. Think of it as an Amazon.com experience for data scientists, data analysts to come and shop for the data. This data could be both internal and external. Databricks, of course, has its offering around marketplace, and there are some other offerings being evaluated as well at this point of time. Same thing with the other two things, Mosaic AI. The intention here is once the data lakehouse has been filled, different data scientists can come in and be able to use their LLM of choice, of course, within a governance structure, to be able to run the analytics. Not just LLMs, they're open source models that are out there, et cetera, and being able to access those. Genie, one of the key goals ultimately within the next sort of 12 to 18 months is to reduce the reliance on pure engineering to be able to get your business analytics. So can a business analyst, a business user, can they go in and can the data talk to them? Can they talk to the data, converse back in simple English? And again, that's one of the things that's being considered there with Genie, but other tools such as Power BI, et cetera, are also being considered and evaluated in this. Okay, let me talk about a little bit about how we are going about this implementation. We don't have the luxury of starting from scratch. I think that's the common theme that exists with most companies who are speaking on here, especially a bank as storied and as SMBC. So a lot of data already exists. There are lots of data platforms that exist. And while we're trying to do that and switch out sort of the guts of the data infrastructure, that is not a trivial problem to solve. There is a lot of skepticism that needs to be overcome from business users. Gordo, you touched upon that earlier as well. You need to convince them to come on this journey with you. And you also need to maintain existing processes that exist on a day-to-day basis while sort of switching out what relies underneath, right? So again, the way we started off, this should not be a surprise. We started off with a blueprinting phase where, again, depending on the different priorities that we collected from different business groups and technology groups within the bank, we figured out what are the appropriate tools and technologies to use. So that was done in the blueprinting phase. Then we went to the MVP phase, which is very critical. This is where our attempt was made to bring on certain skeptical stakeholders on board. So we ran an 8-week MVP exercise towards the end of last year, where we picked a small use case, targeted use case related to compliance, where we ran the front to back use case through all the medallion architecture and provided it to the users. And this was quite helpful. There were performance tests done as well around these things. And we brought on these business stakeholders on the journey, because ultimately data is in the service of business, technology is in the service of business, and if you can't solve those needs, the platform's not going to exist for a long time. And now what we have embarked on is this incremental delivery, which is iterative in nature. And the challenge that we're trying to solve for along the way is we are making these changes, but we want to make sure that the downstream consumers of this data are not impacted by changes that are taking upstream of them. The other thing we need to make sure of is, as new use cases are coming up, and they're coming up every day, new use cases, we don't take on tech debt. This is done through two horizontals. There's a technical component to this, which involves architecture and engineering. And then there's a data management component to it as well. So we are also maturing the operating model as we go along on this journey. So as new data domains are being onboarded, identifying who the data owners are for those, making sure the federation of those responsibilities are taking place appropriately, so on and so forth. So it's a tricky journey. As I said earlier, within 1 year itself, the aim is to have all the structured data in the bank, or at least the relevant structured data in the bank, available in the bronze layer. And for the silver layer and the gold layer, that's going to continue over in 2026 and potentially into 2027 as well. Okay, so one of the things I do want to mention is how are we accelerating this journey? And Gordo talked about the fact that we are using things such as GenAI to make sure that these things happen at a fast pace. If these things occur at a glacial pace, again, adoption is going to lose momentum, so we want to make sure that this happens quickly. One of the things we're deploying here, and these are some Deloitte tools that exist in the marketplace, it's a service called Data as a Service for banking. And there are a few things in here that I want to quickly highlight. From a banking perspective, as I mentioned, there are certain products which are deposits, retail lending, commercial lending, capital markets products, so on and so forth. Over years, there is a standardized attribute listing that's available for this. This serves as the basis for the silver layer that we talked about earlier, which is a domain-based construct. Then there is this concept of smart map. One of the things those of you who have worked in the banking sector will know that between the system of record, which is where the data originates, and your data warehouse, data lakehouse, whatever might be the case, there are a series of transformations that need to occur. Now, one of the things is there are some fairly standard core systems and system of records that are out there, such as FIS, Fiserv, so on and so forth. And what Smart Map does is it provides out-of-the-box mapping between that attribute listing as well as these various different systems of record. So again, that's an accelerator for this journey. What this also does is it captures the transformation between the system of record and the target in plain English language. A few things at the bottom, and this is where GenAI really comes in. There is this concept of an automated ETL engine. We talked about standardizing the ingestion process so that it can be federated out to different teams. The automated ETL engine is how we do that. There is this concept of an intelligent business glossary. Generative AI is helping make data governance a lot easier. So instead of having an army of folks who write business data definitions, you can use GenAI for that. Same thing with data quality. So the net result of that is much faster time to market, much higher data quality coverage, which for a regulated industry such as banking is extremely important, and just greater reliability once you do go live. So all of these things are, again, helping build credibility as we build this platform, bring on the skeptics on board, and ultimately lead to a successful delivery. So I think that covers the main things that we wanted to cover. Gordo, do you want to bring it home for us with the key takeaways?
What I would say, and there's a few key takeaways here, but first I'd want to say this. This data problem, I'm going to call it that, is actually a leadership challenge. It's a leadership ownership challenge across the board. And I'm going to quote Jamie again because he said it so insightfully. He said, the business is technology and the technology is the business. They have to know each other inherently. And so winning over the hearts and minds of the consumers of this information, if we don't win that battle early, we can't be successful. You cannot. You could build all the tools you want, all of this flow, until you get them very comfortable with what we're doing. So our real goal here is, if you look at it, is how do we get that governed platform? Well, governed is a lot of things to different people. Governed means we have all the controls, we can identify lineage, we can get all that stuff done. That should become table stakes for us. It should be something that everyone knows they can push a button and get it. They want, there's always, everyone just wants things to work. This is a really hard thing to make just work. So the engineering behind it is critical. We have a lot of people working on it, and Deloitte as a partner, but it's going to take time, but we have to start winning over those hearts and minds early. And we've done that early days, but we have to continue to do that. And if we don't, then we start falling back. So to me, it's leadership. It's leadership by tech teams all the way down to the developer, the people doing any code, and it's leadership all the way to the top of the business, our CEO. We have to be aligned, and without that, you can't be successful. The time to market, of course, we want to, that's our goal. The innovation piece is kind of critical. We always talk about innovation. I think every bank does. Some invest massive amounts of resources into it. The goal is that we are able to leverage all those innovative tools in a much more simple way from that end user. And you mentioned a lot of the tools that are coming, like Marketplace. Imagine a day where you go in as a business user and just type something in, and it actually comes up with your analytics just based on plain language. I mean, that's where we want to go. And you can get there. We can get there. But again, it's the data at the source that's going to be key. If we get that wrong, it'll all be wrong. It'll look nice, but it won't be correct. So that's why that governed platform is key. And then, obviously we want to, partnering with Deloitte, we need these accelerators. This is not a problem we can wait on. The drive for the business is incredibly strong to try and grow, to try and be global. We talked about trying to share across regions. We can't do that effectively unless we get this right. So, no pressure, but we feel it, right? We feel that pressure from our business stakeholders. There's big investment in this. I'm sure you all feel probably the same way if you're in a similar situation. And we want to be successful, not only for us, but for our business and our clients. So I'll close it there unless you have any further thoughts, Anj?
No, I think winning the hearts and minds is a great message. Ultimately, technology and data is in the service of business outcomes and business goals. And without that, we're not going to go anywhere. Yeah,
hearts and minds are great, though. Once you get a couple people, you have the biggest supporters, and they will push for more investment. And investment, I don't always mean dollars. Investment in changing processes. Those legacy platforms usually come with legacy processes that people don't like changing. And when you get them some new way of working, then and it really does work and they can prove it, then you can change things and they get efficient. It's not just about the tech and the application itself. So the hearts and minds, that's what we're going for.
That's right.
All right.